we are live. Welcome to Welders of IG. I'm Joel Ridzak. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you check out our Patreon at patreon.com/weldersofig. That way you'll get your content a day or two early and be entered into one of our giveaways. We're giving away welding hood, welding equipment, all that good stuff. So today we have a very, very special guest, Mr. Joel Jamieson. Joel, how are you doing?
Nice. Doing great. I hope I'm the only other Joel you've had in the show so far.
Yes, you are. You are. So
we need to unite.
You need to unite. Joel's together. Together strong.
That's right. Joel's of IG.
Joel's of IG. So you are not in the trades. You are not a welder. Let's just get that clear.
No, I can't weld shit. I can guarantee you that. It would be very bad if I attempted it, I promise you.
Great. Okay, so that's out of the way. Tell us your origin story. Where did you get your education, and what got you into sports science?
So going back to high school, I played sports. I wanted to go play collegiate football. I played briefly at the University of Washington, and basically just realized I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. I just didn't have the athleticism. I kind of realized the road was going to end for me, and I had a bunch of concussions. So I got into the training side out. I'd always been fascinated by the strength conditioning and the weightlifting, and I was always passionate about that. So I went to the University of Washington's weight room, and I just said, hey, I want to help out. Like, I want to learn the field. And there was a really great coach there named Bill Gillespie, who really took me under his wing, helped me out. Basically mentored me, got me started on the path. And I just loved the idea of helping other people, achieve their athletic success and performance. I just loved the training aspect of it. And then Bill went over to Seahawks, so I followed him over there, spent a year doing that. And then I kind of had another crossroads. I kind of decided I could keep going down the path of working with teams and organizations and playing that game, or I could branch out and try and do something on my own. The main reason I decided not to go down the professional strength coaching route was because it's like you're playing musical chairs. Coaches are always changing jobs. You're having to move cities. It's a stressful career. Like a lot of those guys, the guys I worked with the Seahawks have been in 4 or 5 different places since I worked with them. So I said, I want to control my own future. I don't want to be moving around the cities and the countries for the rest of my life. And so I opened up a gym back in 2003. I was 23 years old, didn't know much, but thought I knew everything. And I got really lucky. I opened up next to a place called AMC Kickboxing, which obviously which turned out to be really the forefront of MMA and combat sports. And that was largely because of Matt Hume, who's really the best coach in the history of the sport. And so I was really lucky early on in my career. I was introduced to these very high-level combat athletes, and the first guy walked over, Ivan Salaverry, who maybe old school MMA fans will know who he is, came over and he's like, hey, can you train me for a K1 fight? Like, he saw football players and stuff over there. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I was like Googling, what the hell is K1? Like, I didn't really know what the sport was, right? But I was like, yeah, I need money, I'll train you, no problem. And so I made a common mistake. I was like, okay, well, let's test this guy. And I tested him the same way I would a football player. And I'm like, man, this guy is weak. Like, he can't squat his body weight. He does like 3 pull-ups. Like, he's kind of soft. Like, this is going to be easy. I just got to get this guy really strong, and he's going to go out and kill people. I'm going to look like a genius.
His combine numbers are terrible.
Yeah, this guy is not getting drafted by anybody, right? So I basically start lifting weights, and then I'm like, I should probably go see what the sport, like, I need to learn the sport. And so he's like, come roll with me. I'm like, I've seen it on TV. Like, okay, how hard could it be? And at this point, I'm like 220, I'm strong. Ivan's like 185 and weak, right? So I'm like, I'm going to manhandle this guy. And so, I go over there and I manhandle him for like 5 seconds. And then I'm gassed out. And he's tapping me out left and right and double arm barring me and triangling me. And I'm like, holy shit, like, this is a whole different ball game, Like, I had never felt that level of just helplessness against somebody that I thought was so much weaker, was weaker than me from a max strength standpoint. So I realized I had to learn everything about conditioning because I'd been so focused on the strength side. Bill, who I mentored with, is an 800-pound bench presser. The guy is a strength monster and was great at training football athletes, but I just didn't have the experience training combat athletes. So once I realized that, I was like, man, I really have to understand this game because these guys are counting on me to get them ready for a fight. And it's not like team sports where you're like, oh man, the team lost, and there's all these factors and these different people that can take the blame. And it's like, guy goes out and gasses out in the ring or the octagon or the cage. Might have been your fault, dude. You were a strength coach and a conditioning coach. So, back then there wasn't a whole lot of people writing about it. There wasn't that much info about it. It was still fairly underground. I mean, these are the old school days, like '03, '04. We got to lunch with Randy Couture at the time. No one knew who he was. Like, it was a very, niche sport still at that time. So I started just digging into as much as I could, learning the sport, training with the fighters. We had the Pride guys come in. Matt brought in Pride fighters. So we started training Hayato Sakurai, and we had Akira Shoji, and just a bunch of old school fighters that your guys will have to be old enough to remember who they were. But it was awesome. So it was just, digging in the trenches and learning everything I could to learn. And that really turned into a career I never expected, because as the sport grew, I was really the one training tons of top athletes, Rich Franklin and Chris Lieben and Ben Rothwell and, Jens Pulver and Hayato Sakurai, like all these guys that were at the top of their sport. And as the sport was exploding, really put me in a good position. And so I quickly realized, like, a lot of people out there are trying to understand conditioning from MMA, and they're like me, they didn't know what the hell they're doing. So they're screwing it up. And so I started 8 weeks out my website back in '09, not really sure how much traction I'd get. And all of a sudden, boom, like I just started getting people showing up the site, reading articles, and I decided to write a book, and then it just kind of grew from there. So
You literally wrote the book on MMA conditioning. Tell us more about that.
yeah, so funny story is, I'd never written a book before. So I wrote Ultimate MMA Conditioning, and my thought was like, well, I don't want to write this huge book if this is not going to sell. Like, I don't want to waste my time. So I'm like, I'll write half of it, and then I'll make it available for pre-sale, and if I get enough sales, then I'll finish it. If I don't, I'll just refund the money and call it a day, right? Because I was still busy training athletes all day long. Like, I was basically writing this thing in the middle of the night to get it done. So I write half of it. I put it up for pre-sale. I'm like, okay, it took me like, let's say 6 weeks, so I'll put the pre-sale for like 6 weeks later. Like, I can finish it in the same amount of time. And so I sold like 400 the first day, which
Whoa.
was like a good amount, right? Like, that was a good amount, back then. So I'm like, okay, shit, now I got to finish this thing. Turns out it took me like 2.5 months to finish it.
Oh, no.
People were pissed. Like, I was getting emails every day. Where's my book? Like, you stole my money. Like, I was like, oh, I'm working on it, I promise. I'm like screenshotting pages as I'm working on it. So, I mean, a few people canceled, but most people stuck with me, fortunately. And they got great reviews, and people loved it. It really kind of set the tone for how to train MMA and build conditioning. So the interesting too is it grew out of just MMA. I mean, I had teams, I had NFL teams, I had NBA teams, the interesting too is it grew out of just MMA. I mean, I had teams, I had NFL teams, I had NBA teams, I had military I had all these different organizations and all these different teams and people using the principles that I taught for the book, and they're applying it to other sports. Because really, if you think about it, and I don't know how many people are out there looking for fitness information, but a lot of the fitness stuff out there is like strength training or bodybuilding or dieting, and that's it. And then anything conditioning wise is like, do a bunch of intervals until you kill yourself. That's it. Like, where's the actual science or the methodology or any sort of principle behind that? There's really just a big void in the market for intelligent conditioning and thinking about conditioning the way we do about everything else. Like, there has to be some science behind it. There has to be some principles and a philosophy and methods. And that's really what I put in the book. And so it caught on, and that really was the genesis of, my whole career of going from just training athletes to training not just the ones in front of me, but athletes from all over the world, and then the coaches that are coaching them. And so it just evolved into a much bigger, outreach than I'd ever planned for, but I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, awesome. And some of that science is HRV, heart rate variability, for those of you who don't know.
Yep.
Can you give us a quick little breakdown of what that is?
Yeah, sure. So I won't go too far in the story, but back in like the early 2000s, like before I opened my gym, actually, I was introduced to HRV by this Russian company who had pioneered the use of HRV. The long story short is it was really used way back in like the 50s and 60s as part of the Russian space program. And the first man in space was a Russian, and he actually used HRV, and they essentially were using it to measure what happens physiologically when you put someone into space. And what you basically find out on the physiology side is your heart doesn't just beat like a metronome. It beats with some irregularity or variability, and how much variability depends on the body's regulatory systems at play. So when you're under stress, it beats one way, and when you're under a more recovery or energy positive state, it beats another way. And so HRV pulls out that information by measuring the time in between heartbeats, and it can give you a really good gauge of how much overall stress your body's under, the cost of the stress you've been under over the last few days, and of course that gives you some insight into what is my body ready for now. And then the other thing that's valuable about it is over time it also correlates and changes very, very closely with your aerobic system, which is a really big part of conditioning. So if we see your HRV going up on average, it means your aerobic fitness is improving. It means your conditioning is probably getting better. If we see it going down or not improving, well, it means you're probably not really improving or it's getting worse. So it gives us kind of this barometer of, are we going the right direction? And then on a daily basis, it helps us guide the training process to figure out like, okay, should we go out and really hit it hard today? Do we want to take a day back off a little bit? I mean, the best coaches in the world are very, very good. Matt is the best at intuitively understanding what the athlete needs at any given time. But that's a skill that's developed over years and decades. I mean, Matt's been doing this since, he probably could walk, for God's sakes, and he just intuitively knows. The good coaches can just watch the athlete and know what they need on a given day or a team. But the average person, like, we don't have that sixth sense. It takes a long time to build it. It's something not everybody has. It's a skill. So that's really what HRV can help you substitute. Like, it's giving you objective information to help guide that thought process of, what do I need to do today to get better tomorrow? And I think that's the biggest thing it helps you recognize, is that the decisions I make today about training and nutrition and sleep, that impacts how I'm going to feel tomorrow and how I'm going to improve or not improve over the long run. So it's just a really great tool for giving us that insight that we don't otherwise have. And we just have to either make guesses or just not even think about it, which is unfortunately what a lot of people do.
No, I was part of that group too. It was all guesswork before I met you. I wasn't trained with a heart rate monitor. It was just that group that trained intervals, just do this, just run a lot. Like, you have no idea where your heart rate is at. You're training blind if you don't work with a heart rate monitor. And once I did that, man, game changer, game over.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to just kind of like make this assumption in your head, like effort equals result. Effort, result. Like, I wish it was that easy. Like, can I go to my work and be like, oh, I'm going to work a little harder, make more money, work a little harder, make more money? Like, that's just, unfortunately, like, there's not this like linear curve of like work, effort, result. Like, that's just not how the human body works, and that's not how life generally works. It's not quite that simple. So we have to just understand the body has got restraints, it's got limitations, and we have to work within those limitations, because when we don't, that's how you get injured. That's how you hit plateaus and never get any better. That's how you get frustrated. I mean, there's a reason that people, don't often reach their fitness goals in the long run. They kind of just go in these like repeating cycles of training really hard and then getting burnt out, maybe injured, and then training really hard. And I mean, it's just over and over again. And combat sports is as bad as any of them, but you see it across, all of fitness. There's a reason that January, the gyms flood with people. February, it's not so busy. And then March, it's empty. Like, it's because people have not really been taught or learned how to work with what their body gives them. They just, again, have this idea that like, I work really hard and I see great results, and I work really hard and I see great results, but it's not quite that simple, unfortunately.
Every damn hustling. Every damn hustling. That's the sound of your future self haunting you, thanking you for using the link in my description. You learned the 18 wealth creating courses on HU2. You made some dough. You did great things. And now you have a ghost. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Thank you. You have Bioforce HRV, but then it morphed into Morpheus. Can you tell us how you kind of changed there and built that up?
Yeah, so I created Bioforce HRV back in like 2011. It was one of the earliest HRV apps on the market. And at that time, it was still fairly niche. Like, there were definitely a lot of people aware of it, but not a lot of people used it when I first released that. Now, I mean, it's on your Apple Watch, for God's sakes. Like, it's become a much bigger deal, even though I think people still haven't really been taught how to use it correctly. But once I'd been using it for years with the athletes, so I wanted to make it more available to everybody. So Bioforce HRV was the first go at that. Now, the great thing about HRV is it shows you the end result of everything that you do. Okay, so it's giving you, again, I like to say it's telling you the total cost on your body of everything you've done to it, whether that's sleep, nutrition, workout, activity, regeneration strategy, all that stuff kind of equals out to some level of stress and on the body, right? And it shows you that, it gives you the big picture, like I mentioned. But what it doesn't necessarily show you is where those things are coming from. Like, you have to know what you did. You have to be a little bit more aware and pay attention to your sleep and those things. And so I realized, like, well, we actually have all that other data from other trackers, right? We have sleep trackers, we have activity trackers, we have heart rate monitors. We can track all those things. And so the idea with Morpheus was, let's not just give you HRV and kind of let you figure out what caused those changes. Let's take HRV and combine it with all these other data from wearables and then turn that into a recovery score and some heart rate zones to help you dial in your intensity every day. And so that was the idea of Morpheus and what it does. Like I said, it connects to other wearables. So Morpheus is not meant to be worn 24/7. It's meant to work with those devices that people already have. So we pull in activity and sleep from Garmin, from Polar, from Fitbit, from Oura, from all the common devices. And then our own Morpheus device measures HRV. Then we give you two things: a recovery score, which is just an understanding of how all those data come together to mean something. And then we give you heart rate zones that change to you every day to help you dial in your training through either interval training or steady state, a combination. And then kind of the next step of that is we're building programs that will help people go through the whole process from start to finish of getting their conditioning or strength, whatever they're trying to develop, by dialing in everything around that. So it's just been a number of years of evolution, of realizing what people still need and how to make the product better and how to help, continue to push what we can do with technology in a meaningful way.
Wow, dude, that's cool. That's so crazy that it combines all those elements and gives you all sorts of scores and information that you can use. That's cool. So you've worked with a ton of notable athletes, powerlifters, football players, MMA fighters. Who holds the conditioning course record? Do you still have that conditioning course?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, sort of. But that started a long time ago. It was really just like, as I was getting into the sport, I was like, let's start to keep an idea of like, this is a question you always have to ask yourself if you're getting a new sport. Like, what do the athletes at the top of the sport do better than everybody else? In other words, like, what makes them really good aside from their skill? Like, yeah, obviously a very good MMA athlete is going to be more skilled than a shitty MMA athlete. But from a physical standpoint, I need to know, like, what are the most important things to train and what things are kind of a waste of time. And that's an important thing to know, because if I spend a bunch of time training too much strength and it doesn't really help them, then I've wasted their time and probably not made them any better. So I wanted to start creating benchmarks for strength, for power, for speed, for different measures of aerobic fitness. And so that's where this conditioning course MMA was born. I started just taking every athlete that came through the door and putting them through these different tests. There were 6 tests. You had to basically do a set time on each piece of cardio equipment, but they were all self-propelled. So it wasn't like run at 6 miles an hour. It was do things like row and bike and Versa climber and tools and Jacob's ladder, and you had to go set distances. So anyway, the ironic thing is the fighters all did really well, and it definitely correlated, meaning the better conditioned fighters definitely did much better on the test. So that was a good sign. But of all people, a ultimate frisbee player
Yes.
came in one day. This dude, so I was training this team called Seattle Sockeye, and they were a really, really high level ultimate frisbee team. And I mean, I've seen ultimate frisbee. I played in high school, but I would not have guessed the level of athleticism those guys actually had. And so this guy comes in, and everyone's like, "Ooh, this is the guy. This guy's gonna kill this course. Like, he's like a conditioning monster. Like, you've never seen a guy like this." I'm like, "Totally,
Right,
like I'm just like, sure, yeah, totally, whatever you say." And this guy came in, I'm not joking, like in jeans and just like a t-shirt and some like, it wasn't even like real shoes. Like, it was kind of not flip flops, but some kind of weird combination. And like, I'm like, okay, I walk him through the course, I'm like, this guy's going to get murdered. And he set the all-time record. No warm up, like nothing. He set the all-time record that nobody's ever, not Rich Franklin, not DJ, not anybody, like Matt Brown, like none of these top-level conditioning fighters, like he set the record that no one ever beat. It's pretty damn funny. So I guess if an ultimate frisbee player challenged your conditioning test, you're probably going to lose, or at least if he does. It was crazy. That I would never have guessed that guy was going to pull it off, but it's yet to been beaten.
Yeah, dude, that course is no joke. Trust me, I've been on it 1,000,001 times. And Rich Franklin, I beat your time. Thank you very much. Just let that be known. Let that be known.
Yeah. Yep.
So you're out in Hawaii right now. You're living the dream. You're flying planes, helicopters. What got you into that? How'd you start flying?
Family. Honestly, my family's in aviation. I've got 8 or 9 pilots in the family. So I grew up at 3 or 4 years old in a Cessna 150 with my grandpa flying around, and then I started flying when I was 13 or 14, soloed the first time when I was 16, my birthday. It's just kind of always been a part of the Jamieson legacy, if you will. We've flown everything from, my uncle flew 777s, my cousin flies private Lear jets, another uncle flew Black Hawks. Like, I don't know, we've just flown everything, anything. And so I got into the airplane side first, and then about, 7.5 years ago, got in the helicopter side of things. So it's one of those things where once you get in it and you You just never want to get out of it. But most people, unfortunately, just never get exposed to it. It's one of those things where if you don't have a good friend or a family member or something, not a whole lot of people are just walking into it. But yeah, it's awesome. I've flown all over the world, helicopters, airplanes, you name it, and it's a huge passion of mine. Um, Alaska, honestly, I flew my helicopter from Seattle up through Alaska. So went up the entire BC coast, the outside passage, up the shoreline there, up into the glaciers. I mean, it's just Alaska is spectacular, and when you can see it by helicopter, and not just like a tour helicopter where you're crammed in the seat of six people and you're looking out sideways the window for 5 minutes until you turn around. Like we flew way up into some pretty amazing glaciers and terrain. It just blew my mind. So Alaska is really, really hard to beat. I went down to Antarctica on this last December, did a cruise down there. I didn't get to fly, but they had a helicopter on the ship. I tried my best, but I did find a company that we can potentially go back and fly around Antarctica. So I think that'll be the goal for 23 or 24, and that'll probably be maybe my new favorite, but we'll
Ah,
see.
okay, cool, cool. So you're in Hawaii right now. Did you just do that as a honeymoon trip, a long honeymoon trip? I know you were recently married. No?
Uh, yeah, I got married in August. No, we've been coming to Hawaii for 3 or 4 years, and just each time during the winter we stayed a little bit longer. So last year we stayed about 2.5, almost 3 months. This year we're staying 4 months. I mean, basically, I mean, Seattle's like in the wintertime. It sucks.
Terrible. It's gray.
It's terrible. So Seattle's awesome for like July through the end of August, September. Like rest of the year, like it's not so awesome. And Hawaii is amazing. So I was like, well, I'm at a point, where I don't have to manage a bunch of people, and my training is in business and coaching. Everything is mostly online these days. So why the hell am I in Seattle all winter? It sucks here. So I just up and moved in the wintertime to the North Shore of Oahu and on the beach every day, getting in the sun, and it's a whole. I mean, it's a ball game changer when you don't dread the wintertime and you're actually looking forward to it. I'm like, I can't wait till January gets here. We're going to Hawaii versus like, oh god damn, it's January. It's raining every day. It sucks. So just started coming out here for that reason. I can't imagine I'll ever spend much winter in Seattle again.
Very
Honestly,
smart.
it's just too good out
Very
here.
smart.
Yes.
So tell us more about that beach. We were kind of touching on that before we started recording here. That's like one of the most famous beaches in Hawaii, in the world, really?
Yeah, so we're basically on this big stretch on the North Shore that runs. We're on it's actually called Keiki Beach, but Keiki runs to like Sunset, and where Bonsai Pipeline is. So that's where a lot of the big Hawaiian tournaments are held. They just had the WSL Pipe Masters tournament out here. That was at Pipeline. We can walk down to that, and then the other direction is Waimea Bay. So Waimea Bay is the other huge surf break in on North Shore that most people hear about. It has big 30, 40, sometimes 50-foot waves come through it. They run the Eddie Cow there, which is this massive surf tournament every few years. So I mean, the North Shore is really one of the surf meccas of the world, and Bonsai and Waimea are the two kind of cornerstones of that. So it's really cool. I mean, like I said, they had the tournament down at Pipe Masters not too long ago, a few weeks ago, and walked down. Kelly Slater won that, and it was an amazing tournament. And then they had another one down at Sunset like a week later. So there's just monster surfing action out here. So it's really cool to see. It's not a sport that I ever, I've surfed a little bit here and there, but nothing like what those guys do. So it's been really cool to be part of that community.
And not on these waves. These are pro waves. You've seen people get dragged
Yeah,
out.
if you've never gotten, like, it's one thing to get rolled up by a fighter. It's another thing to get rolled up by the ocean. Like they're two different things entirely. Like I'll take any fighter on top of me versus a wave pounding me into the ground, because it's no joke. Like people, like we're talking about, people do die out here. It's a serious game. So you gotta know what you're doing. You're gonna pay the price. So I can surf little waves, but not these giants. I'm not there yet, Kuno.
It definitely needs some conditioning when you're out in those waves, especially when you get ripped back out to sea.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are really good at holding their breath. Like they're legit athletes. I mean, I know it looks like they're just kind of paddling out and surfing, but no, they're really good athletes. I mean, they train their ass off, not just on the waves, but physically and mentally. You have to take the kind of punishment some of these guys do. So I mean, I don't know if you guys haven't watched anything about surfing. There's a great show on Netflix called I think it's called 100 Foot Wave or something on Netflix, and it's kind of the quest for monster waves. And there's guy Garrett McNamara, who is kind of the cornerstone of it, surfing out in Nazaré in Portugal. I actually saw him on the beach like last week, so it's that was really cool. But if you guys want to learn the big game of surfing, like that's a really cool Netflix series that is out about it that gives you just a ton of information, insight into what these guys do, and they're nuts. I mean, they're legit nuts. Like, you want to kill yourself, like start riding some monster waves or go in the mountains. One of the two will get you sooner or later.
Yeah, that's crazy. 100-foot waves, nothing to joke about. So you said you have a new conditioning program, coaching program coming out. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I wrote Ultimate Conditioning way back in the day, and the core idea was to really teach people how to be their own coach. It wasn't just to be like, hey, go do this, because the biggest thing I've learned over the years is everybody's different. I can't necessarily predict how each person's going to respond to a program because I don't know anything about them. So I can give people programs and make my best guess, but you really have to teach people the principles behind it. And so it's really why I've hesitated up to this point to just put out a bunch of programs. Because I knew there's more to it than that. So I decided to launch and release what I call a master program. And really all that is, it's a combination between a training program and a master class on the topic. So I'm going to launch basically what I call a conditioning master program, where they're going to get an 8-week conditioning program, but then on top of that, they're going to get a master class about what conditioning is, how it works, how energy systems are a part of it, how movement and mental performance play a role, how to customize the program based on their needs, how to use HRV and recovery. It's really just more than, hey, here, go do this. It's all the philosophy, the strategies, the principles, the underlying things you have to know to really get the most out of a program. So it's my attempt to teach people how to coach themselves, because at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. Everybody, whether they want to be a coach or not, is, because they're either coaching somebody else, which obviously makes them a coach, or they're coaching themselves. They're writing their own programs, or they're doing their own workouts. You really can't avoid the fact that you are a coach unless you're purely reliant on somebody else to train you night and day. You're a professional athlete, but those people are few and far between. Most people, have to take control of their own fitness and be smart about it. And so that was really the idea: is let me create a program that goes beyond just sets and reps and workouts and exercises, and actually teaches people all the underlying things they need to know to improve their conditioning from the ground up. So I'm excited about it. It's coming out in a few weeks. We've got a big group of people that are already interested, of course, from just my email list. And I think it'll be a game changer. And once I get this one out there, I'll work on some other ones. I'd like to do a combat sports one or a conditioning one for conditioning master class for MMA, that kind of stuff. I really just like this idea of give people the program, but then teach them how to actually put all the pieces around it together. And that's something nobody else is really doing. So
nice, dude. That's super cool. So any advice, like any one or two things that you could tell an athlete right now that's what's your best advice, be it get a heart rate monitor or what would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about technology, obviously I believe in Morpheus. It's the most complete picture out there. But stepping away from that, and what I will tell most people is think about consistency above intensity or anything else. Consistency is literally the most important thing for your fitness. And the people that can consistently train on a regular basis, eat the right foods, get enough sleep, they're the ones who are always going to make progress and consistently see their goals. It's the irregularity and the inconsistency that often happens from training way too hard one day and then having to take a day or two off, or getting injured and not be able to train for a week, or sleeping for 6 hours for 2 nights and then trying to sleep 12 hours the next day to make up for it. Like, the more consistently you can do everything, the more you can set yourself up to be successful tomorrow, the more likely you are to actually make continual progress. Because I think that's the trap people fall into, is they're so focused on today, and their decisions impact them tomorrow. And like I said, you train so hard today that you can't train for 2 days, or you train too hard for 2 weeks, then you injure yourself and you can't train for 2 weeks. It kills you. Like, you can't get into that game. And the challenge of fitness is that inconsistencies in one area affect everything else. So if I get 6 hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep because I'm stressed out from work, and then I try to go smash a workout, it's going to have a much bigger impact on me than if I got 8 hours of sleep. I'm much more likely to get injured. I'm much more likely to see shitty results, all these sorts of things. So I guess I would just say, from the big picture of life and fitness and training, the more consistent you can be and the more decisions you can make with that goal in mind, the better off you're going to be. So rather than thinking like, how hard can I smash myself today, think about, what should I do today to make myself ready to train again tomorrow, and the day after that, the day after that, the day after that. It's consistency that wins. So just keep that in mind. I think that's the mindset that people need to have if they want to be successful, really in fitness, obviously, but I think that applies to a lot of things as well.
Nice, great advice. Train smart, not hard.
Well, train hard, but just be consistent in how you approach it, right?
Right, right. Consistency is key, of course. Yes.
Yes.
So where can people find you?
Well, IG, of course, I'm on there. Just Coach Joel Jamieson, IESON. And then 8 Weeks Out is the main hub of the website, just 8weeksout.com. You can get to Morpheus from there, but if you want to go directly to Morpheus, that's trainwithmorpheus.com as well. So you can just Google my name and click on whatever pops up. You'll probably figure it
Hold
out.
on, I'll put some links in the description. Are you gonna catch a bite, catch a wave, catch some sun rays now? What are you up to now?
Actually, getting ready. We're going to the UFC gym here after it gets dark. So there's a UFC gym in a place called Mililani, which is like, I don't know, 30 minutes away. So we get our Monday, Wednesday, Friday lifts on down there. So we'll wait for the sunset and head down and get a lift on, and then come back, get some work done.
Nice, awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for joining my podcast, Welders of IG. Really appreciate you coming on and telling us about all your programs and how to stay fit.
Yeah, no problem. If anyone wants to learn how to weld, I'm not the guy, but if you want to get in shape, I'll be happy to help any way I can.
Great. Thanks, Joel.
No problem.